Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we're empowering ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How you doing this morning, Jared?
It's good, my man. Routine. He changed up his breathing and threw off his words there, so it's funny to see. Funny to see. I'm good, dude. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
Got a little work on the head. You've been sparring while I was gone?
Yep. Getting some good sessions in, getting ready to knock out one of the big goals of the year, first MMA fight coming up.
Yeah, how you feeling coming off of Ramadan?
I'm feeling great. I'm feeling really good, yeah.
So I was curious, did you end up losing weight during that fasting period?
16 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of it was water, though.
Sure, yeah, you just don't get enough time to hydrate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wasn't sure if a lot of people lost weight during Ramadan or if they just cram their calories in the hours they can eat.
Yeah, I mean, some people lose their mind and just pig out all night, and probably don't lose too much weight, but I tried to keep it pretty healthy. I tried to keep it pretty lean and probably wasn't getting that many calories in the evenings.
Yeah, well, props to you for doing it, and now I'm glad we can have coffee during our podcast.
Yeah, appreciate
to drink a coffee.
Yeah, cheers to that.
Yeah, amen. How are you, man? Everything else good?
Yep, everything else is good. We have some cool business stuff, and tied together with the theme, having to work on one of my weaknesses a little bit. So that is the theme for today, is acknowledging weaknesses.
Yeah, and this is funny, and I hope you guys don't find this to be arrogant or conceited in any way, but this is one of the areas that Ali and I are very, very compatible, and I think is why we work well together, is in prepping for this podcast, when we asked, okay, what is your weakness? Like, literally both of us kind of just got silent. We had to think for a while. Because, and it's not that we don't have weaknesses, we just don't spend a ton of time living in our weaknesses. And I think that's really going to be kind of one of the focuses of this podcast, is it's okay to have areas you're not good, but what do you do with that information? Do you sit and let that hold you back and keep you from using your strengths because all you're thinking about is what you're not good at? Or do you bring those people around you that kind of supplement you and their strengths pick up your weaknesses? Do you outsource it? Do you collaborate with people that are different than you so that you're balancing each other out? And I think this will be a fun one to discuss.
Yeah, agreed. And to add to that, it's a big part of it is that we're not necessarily really ever focused on those. So we did have to take some time to be like, okay, what are my weaknesses? Because we've been really fortunate to build teams around us, build people around us to supplement those. So it was a challenge, but I think that this podcast will uncover a lot. So let's start with you, Jared. What do you think right now at this point in your life is one of, if not your biggest weakness?
Patience. Yeah, and I thought about that quite a bit. I struggle at times because, quite honestly, time's short. And I know that where I'm at in life, I don't have as much time ahead of me as I probably do behind me now. Or as much, time where my body can fully do everything it's supposed to. At some point when you age, your body breaks down a little bit, and sometimes you're limited. I'm going to fight that, but the reality is, towards the end of your life, you kind of slow things down. So, to me, it's being patient while still being aggressive and balancing out those two, because they're opposites, but they're both equally important. I need to be patient to allow things to naturally occur and to allow the work we're putting in to blossom and to allow relationships to take their natural course. But at the same point, I can't be lazy and inactive and say, well, I'm being patient, so I'll do it tomorrow. I'm being patient, so I'll just slow down a little bit because I have to be aggressive to force things to happen. So for me right now, that's probably my biggest struggle, is balancing those two things out. And you're similar, you're a very go guy. What strategies or ideas do you have on how do you balance it? How do you balance out patience with being aggressive to get things going now?
It's a fantastic question because I struggle with that as well. And I think right now what I'm using is taking consistent inventory, right? Back to the awareness of asking yourself, is this the time to be patient, or do I need to turn it up? And getting consulting, right, from that circle of five too. A great example is like preparing for this MMA fight. Having coaches in my corner like you, like Ryan, like Steve, watching my progress will help me know, it's like, all right, dude, you're ready, get in there. Or be patient, we need to train a little bit more before you're ready to get in the cage. So consulting with yourself and consulting with others, I believe is a good way to identify whether or not it's the time to be applying patience. What are you trying to do to help with that?
It goes back to something we talked about before, is just being grateful and being grateful for the journey and realizing that I'm not always in control of it. I'm in control of how I show up and the work I put in, but I'm not in control of if something happens today or happens tomorrow. If somebody receives, a proposal and decides, okay, today's the day we want to sign the contract. Like, I don't control the back end of all that. I don't control what everybody else is going to do. So I think for me, it's just being grateful that if something's taking longer than I hoped, there's a reason for that. Okay, what am I supposed to be learning while it's taking longer? And the truth is, when I look back in my life, the things that happened super quick and super easy, I didn't appreciate and respect anyhow. So I think just checking my perspective and realizing the longer something takes, the longer I have to work for something, the more I'll appreciate it down the road.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
But it's that awareness piece.
Yeah.
Right, and I think that's where we struggle is, I know it's my weakness, so I'm aware of it, but I don't spend all day beating myself up over it.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that's where our listeners kind of go, wait a second, am I spending too much time on my weakness?
Right.
What about you? What would you say is your biggest weakness or something that you need to work on now?
I would say patience as well. And we had a conversation the other day. So what is it that you had said you see as my biggest weakness?
Just taking on too much and not being able to tell people no. And prioritizing like what's best for you right now versus what helps everybody else that wants something from you. Right,
exactly. Yeah, when you told me that, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I knew that, right, deep down, but you really brought it out, and I was like, oh shit, he's absolutely right, because I always feel like I can add more on my plate, right? If I'm stretched thin, I'll figure it out. I'll delegate tasks, and that's not a healthy habit to get into. To where you recently inspired me after that conversation to make a big decision, and this was 2 days ago that I resigned from a position in Toastmasters. For those of you who don't know, Toastmasters, look into it, fantastic organization for improving public speaking and leadership skills. Quick plug for Toastmasters. As you can see, I'm always repping them and serving that organization, and I've recently been elected to a big position called Division Director, to where I would oversee about 33 clubs, and I would delegate to 6 different areas, and great opportunity for leadership position, but I have some higher priorities right now, to where until we had that conversation, and I had a dream before that conversation I think I was telling you about, to where in my dream I decided to resign, and it felt right. But a month ago you would have asked me, I would have been like, fuck no, I'm not going to resign from that, like I'm not going to back down, I'm going to go ahead and do it, getting done. But that is a weakness that has been holding me back from really focusing. I don't know who said it, but some wise man said that if you have a lot of priorities, then you don't have priorities.
Right.
And I had too many.
Yeah, and I think the interesting point on that, and something that we can all learn from, is sometimes we don't see our weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Or we know they're there, but we don't actually act upon it until somebody else says, hey, this is your weakness. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I want to challenge our listeners out there. How many of you have actually asked somebody you respected or somebody you look up to, a mentor, hey, what are my weaknesses? How do you see this? Because and the analogy I like to use on that, it's like raising a kid. You're around them every day, and they're growing every day. But because you're there every day, you don't see it. But all of a sudden you go back to grandma's house or your uncle or somebody you haven't seen in years. It's like, oh my God, Ali, you're so big. And your dad's like, he is? He looks the same, but because we're around that constant day-to-day growth, the day-to-day struggles, sometimes we don't see the truth there. But you ask somebody else, hey, what do you see as my strengths? What do you see as my weaknesses? Again, it's somebody you trust, somebody that's in a position that you're looking to aspire to, somebody that you respect, they should be able to tell you. And I think it was interesting for us because we were both able to give each other weaknesses way quicker than we could figure out our own. And I think people miss that a lot of times, right? And in a lot of our world now, if I tell you, hey, dude, I think you got to work on this, our natural reactions are throw up our barriers and be like, oh yeah, well you got to work on that. Right. Now we get in this battle. Neither of us gotten better. Neither of us have improved. And the thing I like about your example and where that conversation is, for you to do all the things you want to do, sometimes you have to be selfish. And when you're reliable and you're a high performer and you have high goals and you get stuff done, there's so many people that are going to want you on their team because they need people like you. And it's hard to protect ourselves. And honestly, MMA is a perfect example of it. How many fighters get taken advantage of by promoters? It's a ton, right? Because fighters need opportunities. Promoters have to control the opportunity. So a fighter, and you see this, a fighter gets knocked out bad or loses really bad, damaged, injured. They shouldn't fight for a year. Medically, right? Medically, let the brain heal, let their body heal. And what do you know? 3 months later, they're back and they're fighting again. Why is that? Because somebody gave them an offer and they don't know how to say no. They don't know how to prioritize themselves. And sometimes it's financially based. They need to make money. But a lot of times, it's just we don't know how to say no. We don't know how to protect ourselves from ourselves a lot of times. Yeah. So we take on all these other things. And then what ends up happening? We get resentful.
And we caused it.
Right, and it was literally, we could have said no. Right. And, I think that's a whole other topic is how do you say no, and does no mean forever or just not now? And that's definitely a weakness of mine. I'm very permanent. Yeah. If I say no, I'm moving on. Right. And that's probably cost me over my life. It's cost me relationships and probably business opportunities because I told you no in such a manner that you're like, fuck, he's an asshole. I'm not going to ask him again. When I could have been like, hey, dude, I just don't have time right now. Right. Let me see some things. Let's talk in 6 months. Let's talk in a year, and we'll see if we can make something happen.
Yeah, no means maybe later in sales and with the ladies. You never know.
I don't know, dude. I don't know about the ladies. I think that's a whole other spin right there. That's a whole other podcast. So conversely, what do you? So I think I see my weakness as patience and sometimes struggling to balance. Do I go, or do I kind of wait and let it mature? What would you see?
I would see one of your weaknesses as having to do with what you said, permanence in mentalities and ideologies. For example, I'm always like, hey, Jared, when are you going to take a nap? Nah, I'll never smoke weed. Or, nah, I'll never eat a mushroom. Or nah, I'll never, do anything to where I lose control. Even though, psilocybin was just legalized. They're talking about that getting people off PTSD. A lot of things, and that's just one example, of like psychedelics, but you being pretty just like permanent in certain things, I think could hold you back from expanding your mind more or doing more. Yeah, no,
I wouldn't disagree. I would disagree with the fact that it wasn't legalized. It was decriminalized.
Decriminalized, true.
Big difference.
True.
And your boy Joe Rogan even talked about that on his podcast. I don't disagree. And that's going to be part of the purposeful practice for our listeners is to really put themselves around somebody else that can help them identify weaknesses. Mm-hmm. So then let's talk about the next step. Okay, so my weakness is I'm pretty permanent, and I've always been that way. Mm-hmm. And it's funny you say that because at this stage in my life, I'm pretty good at relationships. Like I just taught a law enforcement class at Highlands Ranch, and it was phenomenal. You know, 13 guys in there, great relationship, helping them get better so they go make other people better, and that's exactly what I want. So at this stage in my life, I have great relationships, and I have them all over the country. But you know how many people I talked to from high school? Zero. Because at that stage of my life, I was like, okay, graduate, I'm gone. I'm not talking to anybody in college, no friends from college. Wow. From the military, I literally have one dude from the military I keep in touch with, because you're exactly right. That was just how I lived. Yeah. And yeah, no, you're 100% right. Now, I don't necessarily think it's going to change my view on mushrooms and marijuana, but definitely.
We shall see.
Definitely in my my relationships, I see that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that a lot of us can look at positive traits from our weaknesses, right? There can be a place for permanence and commitment, right, to where you're committing to a decision. And it brings me to the next topic of how often, or should we at all, be working on our weaknesses? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's good. I like your initial point. Yes, I'm very permanent. So the bad side of that, my weak side of that, is that I don't have a lot of relationships that have stayed with me my whole life. I just move on. But I would also say that weakness is part of a strength, because I don't give in to peer pressure. Right. I don't have to do everything that everybody else is doing to get them to like me. And quite honestly, if I wasn't so stubborn in some of that stuff, I don't think I'd have what I have now, because I bucked the trend and went against a lot of things. Yeah. So, weaknesses are interesting. I think you got to be aware of them, and then you got to decide how much energy you want to put towards them. Mm-hmm. So, you know, a weakness I had, I would say, for part of my life is I'm not a handyman. I don't know how to fix shit around my house. I can't fix cars. I can't change the oil. And there's part of kind of, I would say there's part of like a man code that you're supposed to do that, right? And when I married Andrea, her family's crazy handy. Mm-hmm. They build all their own shit. Like, I was getting fucking saws. I got a fucking box full of tools and shit for like Christmas. Dude, I didn't know any of it. Like, I never even touched these. I scared to death of power tools, right? Because in my mind, like, I'm cutting my leg off. Like, I'm not touching that thing. And that was a weakness, right? Like, I got made fun of by her family sometimes. Like, I'd literally be like, hey, dude, you want to come up and like show me how to do this? Like, there's some things I would learn, and there's other things I'm just like, hey, I'll make enough money to hire some guy for that. So I didn't put a ton of time towards that weakness of like, oh, I got to learn these crafts for approval. I was like, fuck it, what's my strength? Oh, I can make money over here. I'll do that really, really well and make money to pay for this, because I don't want to learn. I don't want to do it. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, for me, how I approach weaknesses. Is it something I want to improve and something I want to take on to get better, then I'll go after it. But if it's something like, dude, that looks like a lot of time and a lot of measuring, and I suck at math, and I really don't want to cut my leg off with a power tool, so I'm going to hire this guy for that. Right. Then I let him build it. But being aware of my weakness, I bring in people that are good at what I don't want to do. And I think that's where we struggle sometimes, when we know it's our weakness, but we still try to do it to impress other people or for some other reason, and then you end up with a half-assed job because you really didn't want to do it. You just did it for somebody else, and you knew you weren't that good at it. Yeah. Yeah, it takes confidence even to be able to admit, hey, I suck at that, or I'm not good at that, or I don't know how to change the oil. Or I used to dread when they would come over, because I knew they were going to like want to do some power tool projects. And I was like, dude, can we play frisbee or something? I'm really good at lifting heavy shit, and I can run fast. Let's do that stuff. Right. And, you know, they would, dude, I remember they brought me a tool belt, and I literally just looked at that thing, and I was like, I'm never wearing this. You realize, like, never in a million years will I wear a tool belt. You know who wore my tool belt? My wife. She loves that stuff, dude. And I got over my ego. Yeah, dude, she's handy as hell. So she can be handy, and I'll go to the grocery store and make sure we got food for dinner. I'm not a ashamed of that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. You know, it's all about awareness, taking inventory of the weaknesses, and asking yourself, is this something that I want to improve on? Right? Because at the end of the day, we are all extremely intelligent, very capable human beings, to where most of us can learn just about anything. You know, I mean, think about all the languages in the world. This is a cool idea, is that you literally have the capacity to learn any language in the world. If you were born in Russia, you'd be speaking Russian. If you were born in China, you'd be speaking Chinese. Like, our brains are capable of learning and doing a lot. We have different kind of a little bit natural strengths and tendencies towards areas, but we really have to decide. Like, I do a tiny bit of like coding, right, on our back end of our website, so just a tiny bit, but I would never want to spend hours trying to learning how to code and doing all that website stuff. I could, but I'm not going to spend time on that. Like you're saying, I'll hire someone out. I'm not the biggest handyman either. Kind of same thing. I don't change my own oil. I go pay to get an oil change, and like I have no interest in doing that. My ex-business partners always like, dude, like, you don't know how to use like this socket wrench and all this stuff. I'm like, dude, I know how to use regular tools, but no interest in doing that. So yeah, I agree that you have to always, again, having the awareness and taking back to inventory of really do I want to be working on these weaknesses, because truly we need to focus on priorities, double down on your strengths, right?
And that's an interesting topic, right? Because, and I want people to realize you only have so much energy in a day. So you spend a good chunk of your energy trying to build your weaknesses and trying to build areas that you're not very good at. And I always look at, okay, what is my potential to get really good at that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I'm probably never going to be a guy that builds his own house. So do I want to spend the time learning to frame a shed, or should I hire that? Because if I'm putting time in on that, then I'm not doing the things that I'm really good at and that really move our family forward.
Yeah.
Because you only have so much energy, so where do you put that? And to me, I like to just build off my strengths. I'm aware of some weaknesses. There's some I'll work on, there's some I'll outsource, but I will, like you said, double down on my strengths. I really make those so strong that separates me from the crowd.
Right.
And I think, real quick, it's kind of like what you said earlier. Do you want to be average at a lot of things, or really good at a couple? And when you're really good at a couple, especially like in business and your marketing and your fighting career, you're really good at a few things, that can propel you a long way.
Right.
Versus that guy that's kind of average at everything. There's a lot of average dudes. What makes you stand out in your market? What makes you stand out in your competition? Well, you got to be really good at something. So.
Yeah, you can only be in that top 1 to 5% when you're really putting the time in, right? So the awareness piece will also help you figure out how much you need to bring up a weakness to where it's at a certain foundation, what you need it for, right? Here's a business example is SEO, search engine optimization. For those of you who don't know, optimizing your website so people can find you on Google. We went through multiple SEO companies because I didn't know what the hell they do at all. I'm just like, all right, here's $1,000 a month, like make people find us on Google, blah, blah. That was a weakness of mine. I had no knowledge of SEO until I'm spending all this money. I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing? What am I paying for you? I don't know. So then I went to a couple half-day SEO workshops. I learned some SEO. I got my SEO knowledge to a base level foundation to where now my weakness, it's not a strength, but I have enough of a foundation to understand what the hell these people are doing. Okay, like, oh wait, what are these meta descriptions that you're putting here? Why are you doing that? Blah, blah. Okay, now I know a little bit, enough, bringing up a weakness, enough to where I need it. And that's where I think the awareness comes in, is like, how much do I need to work on this, right? For that SEO example, I just needed to learn just enough so that way the people that I'm hiring and paying, I can at least understand what I'm paying them for.
Yeah, you had enough knowledge to be educated on what you're looking for there and what they're supposed to be doing, but you didn't make a foolish decision of thinking you were them, and that these half-day classes could propel you all the way to the top.
Right.
I think sometimes that's when we make that mistake, is we get just enough information to be dangerous to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like your buddy that takes his car apart and it ends up with 2 extra pieces when it's put back together.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, those are probably pretty important. I don't know how you got extra pieces.
Not good.
Just enough knowledge to be dangerous to himself. And yeah, I agree. I like that example. And it's funny you talk about SEO stuff, because I literally just spent some time when I was on the road dealing with SEO stuff, because I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I like creating content, I like shipping it off, and I like people putting it where it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I spend time doing that back end stuff, then I'm not doing the public speaking, I'm not doing the coaching, I'm not doing the stuff I'm really good at. So again, okay, do I know a little bit about it? Yeah, I know what the results should look like. If you do your job, I know this is where we should go. That's all I need to know, because now I can talk to you about, okay, are we performing or not performing? But I'm not trying to do the actual work myself.
Right. Just enough, bring it to that base level. How about Jared? Have you had a weakness turn into a strength?
Yeah, I think, and that's a great point, right? Your weaknesses aren't always permanent.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're going to become a strength. And I would say sometimes I think you're going to be in a balancing act with them. I think sometimes they're currently a weakness and a strength. So I would go back to what you said about me as my permanency. I'll tell you that, you guys that are following the podcast and listen to this for a while know I retired pretty early as a policeman. The majority of police officers that leave, that try to do what I'm doing, will return to police work. Because it's returning to what they know. It's returning to safety and security versus the unknown of where I'm at. So I would say that one of my weaknesses is my permanency at times, but also right now it's serving as a strength, because I knew when I left, I'm not going back. There's no safety net. There's no way I'm returning to what I've already done for 21 years. Like, I'm making a new future. So I think having that permanency mindset and that separation serves me well right now, because it makes me have to take risk. It makes me have to move forward, because I'm not allowing myself to go back. So I want people to look at, okay, this is my weakness, but is it also a strength at times?
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think? Have you had one that you have identified, like, okay, this used to be a strength and here's what I've changed and now look where I'm at?
Yeah, one big thing for my life that used to be a big weakness of mine was confidence. I remember as a child growing up not being very confident in grade school. I remember this kid in second grade mispronounced my last name, and then it was instead of a boozalam in second grade, a boobzalam.
Oh,
and that was the most hilarious thing, right? And I was kind of a jokester, but I was quiet, and I always had great ideas and great things to say, but I had a lack of confidence through grade school, through middle school, and really started to build that up. And that's why I was really magnetized towards things once I got to college, like Toastmasters, like all of these scary things like MMA, wrestling, to build that confidence to where today that's one of my biggest strengths, one of my biggest tools. Is I may not be the smartest, the most skilled, but I'll bet you I'm gonna be the most confident, whether it's in a cage, whether it's in the boardroom, whatever. I'm bringing on the confidence. This mustache isn't just for show, you know what I'm saying? I use confidence as a tool now, and it has been a big, long process to build that weakness into a strength.
So is there anything specifically you remember in that journey of turning confidence or lack of confidence into a strength? Is there an incident you remember that, wait a second, I can do this? Wait a second, I can believe in myself? Or was there a practice you were doing repetitively till you got to the point where you started believing in yourself?
I think there were lots of moments, right? And I think we've talked about this in a previous podcast, to where I dealt with pretty unique racism after 9/11, of people specifically targeting me for being Arab, like terrorists, whatever kind of stuff, to where that was in the 5th grade for me. So that was kind of the primary adversities that started to have me having to build that confidence and respond to things like that. When it came into my later years and going to college and experiencing some of that in, the fraternity life and the oil and gas life, West Texas,
Sure.
Ali Buzlam, the practice was things like continuing to put myself in those difficult situations, continuing to call these landowners and be like, who the hell is Ali Buzlam? Continuing to do that, continuing to go to Toastmasters and speak, continuing to get into the Texas Tech Wrestling Club and do some of those things. So really just putting the work in work that I knew was helping me build confidence, like public speaking, like grappling, like speaking and running for positions in fraternity life. And you? What are some examples to where you felt? So I like your permanence piece, and I think that one you can kind of use as both a strength and a weakness, right? Do you have any examples for our listeners for you that was just straight weakness that you turned into a strength?
Man, I have to think on that one. Yeah, see, it's just so crazy. Like, I literally don't spend much time on weaknesses, so it's tough to think about. A weakness I would have had, man, honestly, relationships were just a huge struggle for me. So to see the community I have around me now, something I'm very grateful for, and something I'm very humbled by and appreciative. So I would say, actually thinking on that, communication. I struggle with communication. My dad, when I was a little kid, called me Muggs. He always called me Muggsy because I was always making a bunch of different faces. And it was just what I did. Like, I just made faces. So, like, I was pissing people off all the time with my faces. Like, you would say something, I'd make a face. And, like, I might not even be thinking what you thought I was thinking, but it pissed you off.
Right.
And I fought a lot as a kid. Because I didn't communicate. And it was weird. That's definitely something that was a weakness to where now I'm a strength. It's crazy if the people that knew me in my late teens, my early 20s would not believe who I am today. Because I didn't give two fucks about you. I was going to tell you exactly what I thought, exactly my way, and I was moving on. And either you did it my way or we weren't hanging out anymore. I look back, I'm like almost embarrassed.
Right.
At like how much more well-rounded I could have been as a person in my 20s if I had just listened to people.
Yeah.
But I was defiant and I just communicated my way. And
I'm glad you said listening, because that's a big part of the communication, right? Not only were you not listening, but you were also not filtering anything you said.
Nothing.
And just speaking probably a lot of bullshit back in those days.
Well, yeah, it was arrogant, right? I think you spend your 20s thinking you know everything about everything. And then you get to a point where you're at, like where I'm at in my life now, and I'm like, man, I don't know nothing about anything. Like, I'm an idiot.
I totally know everything.
Yeah. So communication is a weakness that I've turned into a strength, and but I had to be mindful, right? And I had to study a little bit, and I started reading books on like effective communication, and I realized that communicating wasn't necessarily what I said, but how you heard what I said. And then I had to start thinking differently because I kind of guised it, right? I masked it as I'm just honest. I'm just truthful. Well, I wasn't lying to you, but I didn't have to say it that way.
Right.
Like, I could have been a little smoother. I could have been a little less direct. I could have allowed you to talk back and listen instead of being like, oh, you're talking right now, what am I coming back with? Oh, now I'm coming back. You know what I mean? And
words are powerful.
Oh, dude, I can't tell you how many people I probably hurt earlier in my life unintentionally, just how I communicated.
Oh, 100%. The biggest lie I've ever heard is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Nah, words can hurt more. Words are powerful. How you say things really impact people.
Yeah, so I would say communication is definitely something I struggled with that I've gotten a lot better with now. And if you look at most of my business, most of what I do is all formulating our communication.
Right. Yeah, truly.
What
would you say was one of the books? Because you said you were reading books. What was like the top book that you think helped you out the most?
Well, honestly, I can't remember way back then as much as the books I read now. I read a lot now, so my reading memory is much shorter. Because back in the day, I didn't read. I'll be honest, I went through high school, I don't think I read one book. I would just read like a chapter, write a paper about that chapter, this chapter, and then end and call it good.
Same.
So I don't know that I had a necessarily one specific book, but I do remember some specific people that I could kind of just watch and model and be like, okay, he just basically told them, your idea is wrong. It might be the dumbest idea I've ever heard.
Who's one of those people you're thinking?
Sergeant Wilfor.
Okay.
Mark Wilfor was one of my sergeants in the Air Force, and he was, and I liked him because he was a big, physically intimidating guy, but he never used that to get you to do things his way. So he had rank ahead of you, so he could just tell you to do it. And he had physical size where he could probably just make you do it. But he never did that. Like, he communicated with us in a way that we're like, hey, we want to do this. Okay, Sergeant, we're going to get this done. And then eventually, he didn't even have to communicate to us. We respected him enough that we would just find extra things to do because we knew eventually it would have to get done. And so just watching him, and he gave me books, and I cannot remember the name of them, that talked about like influencing. I don't know there's a famous one like winning people.
Influence and influence people.
Yeah,
Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, Dale Carnegie, and so it's more by a model, right? Like I had the book and I'd read it, but then I'd watch how he did this, and he was a huge influence.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's funny now that communication is like the staple of what I do. When for many years of my life, it was what I was terrible at doing.
Wow. Yeah, that's a fantastic example of turning a weakness into a strength, to where now the primary piece of your business was one of your biggest weaknesses.
And it's just funny though, because honestly my family is very much like I used to be. Very just direct, here it is, you deal with it, I'm moving on. I told you now it's your job, now it's your responsibility. And going back to my grandfather's funeral last week, and being immersed in my family, because I'm not around them a ton, being immersed around them, especially an emotional time like a funeral, I purposely was like, I just want to sit and watch. And part of me is like, I can't believe I used to act this way. And thankfully I was aware of it. I decided to improve, and I had people around me to help improve. And I think that's one of the things that would be great for our listeners to work on, is who in your circle will help you improve. Who will help you by being honest of, hey, here's a weakness, and then kind of not allowing you to hide behind it and say, well, that's just the way I am. Because if you know it's a weakness and you're not happy with it and you want to be different, it doesn't have to be how you are, right? Because how I was is not how I am today. But it only became that because I wanted to change. Yeah.
And that's good stuff, powerful stuff. I got the wheels turning. I'm excited for this purposeful practice that we have for this episode. I think that our listeners are going to really find some value about this. And guys, remember to continue to send your practice in, because that's when we really see some growth. And it's amazing to hear about some of your experiences and be like, wow, because you applied some of the tools that we're using as well to live more purposeful lives, you were able to achieve a little bit more purpose in your life as well. So let's take a look at the purposeful practice. We have part 1, identify your primary weakness. Part 2 is to ask 3 people that you trust and respect, or you value their opinion, what they view as your primary weakness. And then step 3 is to identify if they are in alignment or not. And if not, who's right? Are you right about your primary weakness, or is it the other people that you ask their opinion on their primary weakness? And then what are you going to do about it? And of course, last step is to email your purposeful practice back to us at onpurpose.official@gmail.com.
Yeah, and I think it'll be fun for you guys to discover and peel back some of the layers that we kind of hide behind in life. And, as we work these podcasts, guys, we're right along with you as far as self-discovery and, hey, I hadn't thought about this, I'm thinking about that. So we want to invite you guys to take that next step. Sorry, I'm pulling up my calendar real quick to make sure I get you the right day. We are going to do our first On Purpose workshop, October 19th. It's a Saturday. It's going to run from 8 to noon here in Fort Collins, Colorado. Stay tuned. We'll be putting out an Eventbrite registration and tickets so you can purchase to come to that. The cost won't be much, but you will buy in to be part of it. And I'm a big believer in people don't value a whole lot of stuff for free, and you work harder when you know you've invested in it, because you're not necessarily investing in the product, you're investing in what the product will do for you. So it's going to be a 4-hour workshop. You will come in, we're going to dive deep into this, and you're going to leave in your hands with a blueprint to create that purposeful life you want for your future. Realizing nobody else is going to create it for you, and we're going to help you set that foundation. So I'm excited to do this in person and to really let people know like that purposeful life is there for all of us. Let's create a community that holds ourselves accountable, moves forward towards it, and let's start living that way.
Let's do it. I cannot wait. It's going to be a powerful workshop. I can't wait to create my blueprint.
Oh man, it's so fun. And that's the stuff, looking back at weaknesses and stuff that 20 years ago, I'd have said, no way would I do something like that. And now I'm excited to do it. And now it's what I can't wait to do. So we appreciate all of you guys being here. Please do us a favor. If you're getting value from the podcast, if you're liking it on YouTube, comment, share, rate us on the podcast apps. We are on the first page of iTunes now under any podcast that has the word purpose in the title, which is a huge step for us. But we want those top spots. We want people around the world to realize regular dudes just like us, just like you, can live that, and women, I say dudes for everybody, but dudettes, my ladies, our daughters, our wives, men, women in our lives, we can all create that purposeful life. We can all get more out of this journey. Time is short for all of us, so let's quit wasting time. Let's get together and make this happen. So if you could rate us, share us, let your friends know about us, we would be grateful for that. So remember, team, life is too short to live any other way than on purpose, so we will see you all next week.
Amen.
This has been the On Purpose podcast. If you'd like to follow up on this week's action items or give your feedback, please reach us by email, which is in the description below. If you'd like to follow both Jared or Ali, follow their Instagram accounts, both of which are in the description below. Thanks for listening, and we will see you all next week.